Hello. You are on the channel of Ruslan Belov, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of September 8, 2025. So let's move together to the line of combat contact. We will begin with the Zaporizhzhia sector of the front. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the armed forces of the Russian Federation are actively advancing towards such settlements as Pokrovsk, Huliaipol, and the road that connects these two settlements, Road R85. Over the past 24 hours, Russian units have shown a very high pace of offensive and territorial gains. This is the kind of map we could still observe back on September 3rd, when the first reports appeared that the Russian army had managed to enter the settlement of Novoselivka and possibly even consolidate its hold. This settlement is located along the Volchya River, near the village of Velika Mikhailivka. On September 4th, more information appeared, including footage from objective control, where we could see not just statements, but the actual presence of Russian units in this settlement. By the end of September 4th, the village of Novoselivka was under firm and full Russian control. By September 5th, Russian units became more active in the area of Kamyshivaka, gradually reducing the distance to the next settlements in this direction: Ternova, Berezova, Sosnivka, and Koroshe. By the end of September 6th, reports came in that the Russian army had cleared the village of Koroshe. Again, this information was provided only by pro-Russian sources without independent confirmation. However, on September 7th, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed that the village of Koroshe had indeed been cleared. Russian units had effectively broken through the defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine. By the morning of September 8th, reports indicated that Russian forces had entered Sosnivka and were also outflanking Ternova from the north. Here we see not just a slow advance, but rather accelerating offensive momentum. It creates the impression that the Ukrainian defense in this sector is either on the verge of collapse or has already collapsed. Of course, the Ukrainian side is trying to stabilize the situation. Several counterattacks were launched toward the settlement of Obratne. However, timely laid minefields stopped another attempt by Ukrainian forces to launch a counteroffensive. Several infantry fighting vehicles were destroyed. The offensive continues. In the coming days, we expect reports from Ternova, Sosnivka, and beyond. Next, we move to the Pokrovsk sector of the front, where fierce and bitter fighting continues between Russian units and Ukrainian forces. If we summarize the reports, map corrections, and cartographic updates from different analysts, it can be said that this is the only direction where the Ukrainian side might currently hold the initiative. Ukrainian formations continue counteroffensive actions northeast of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. According to the General Staff, Siversk and pro-Ukrainian mapping services, over the past few days, Ukrainian forces have significantly improved their positions in this area. Just yesterday, some cartographers reported the complete clearing of Vladimirovka, as well as the start of fighting for the settlement of Zaporizhzhia. Today we are receiving further reports of Ukrainian advances. Pro-Ukrainian cartographers from the Deep State team report that after clearing the southern part of Novo-Ekonomichny, the Ukrainian army moved north and approached the settlement of Zarichne. At least for now, Deep State marks this sector as a grey zone, indicating uncertainty about the success of the counterattack. Moreover, pro-Ukrainian cartographers are expanding the grey zone southward toward Novotoretsk. They also report the cutting of a salient in the area of the breakthrough and further movement from Zaporizhzhia toward the settlement of Mayak. Mayak and Pankivka are now also marked as grey zones by the pro-Ukrainian mapping service. Overall, from this we can infer a possible plan by the Ukrainian armed forces to attack from three directions, fragmenting this sector of the front into smaller portions, which the Ukrainian army could then deal with separately. The northern sector, the area around the Fedorivka and Zaporizhzhia mines, as well as the Krasnolimanska and Mirnohradska mines. After clearing these two sectors, Ukraine could potentially restore the positions held at the end of June 2025. However, one important point must be remembered. The Ukrainian side has not yet published any objective control footage that could confirm all these breakthroughs and advances. The only source confirming this information is the General Staff. In other words, Siversk himself may be composing these updates and deciding where exactly to adjust the maps. Next point, Pay attention to this footage. Here we see a Ukrainian multiple-launch rocket system destroyed by an FPV drone of the Russian army at this location. Even if we look at the maps published today by pro-Ukrainian cartographers, the distance from the Russian front lines to this Grad launcher is only about 5 kilometers. Normally, such systems are not brought that close to the front line. Today's footage, along with imagery from the area of Zarichne, where hundreds of destroyed vehicles lie along the road after another Russian kill zone, shows that even if Ukraine has managed to stabilize the situation here and gradually reclaim some territory, it comes at enormous effort, losses, and tremendous risk. Practically on the front line, within just about a kilometer, Russian saboteurs are already present, and these artillery systems are being moved in. This would be impossible in other directions, like Zaporizhzhia, but in this hot sector, it appears possible. We will continue to observe how the situation develops here. Meanwhile, we move on toward the settlements of Siversk and Lyman. Today, the Siversk-Lyman sector is probably the most dynamic direction, along with the advances of the Vostok grouping on the eastern Zaporizhzhia front. At present, the most alarming reports for Sirsky and Ukrainian units are coming from here. The Russian army is advancing along a broad front, from Chandriholov to Kuzminivka, Perezdne, Sever, and Ivanivka, the southern outskirts of Siversk. Here is the map. Before we begin, let's look at how it has changed over the past day. Yesterday, the map looked like this. Today, shading has been added in the Serebryanske forest area, the settlement of Zarichne, Kolodyazy, Chandriholov, and further towards Siversk. Let's start with the Siversk direction. Russian units are actively advancing from the south along the Bakhmutka River, as well as along the railway running from Solidar towards Siversk. Today, several neutral cartographers have updated their maps accordingly. The dynamics here are quite high. Let me remind you that so far, no official sources or geolocations have confirmed this advance. However, overall, we can observe that the momentum here is significant. Russian units, apparently, will now consolidate and regroup before moving further toward the settlement of Zvanivka. If the Ukrainian side loses control over Zvanivka and the strongpoints around it, this will inevitably mean the fall of Siversk within the next few weeks, perhaps a few months. Northern envelopment. Today, pro-Ukrainian, neutral, and pro-Russian experts, essentially all experts, are saying that the Serebryanske forestry has fallen and come fully under the control of the Russian armed forces. Moreover, pro-Ukrainian cartographers report that the Russian army has already advanced right up to the Siversky Donets River. This is a very important strip. You see this line on the map. Apparently, before the war, power lines ran here. They are clearly visible in satellite imagery, and along these lines, Russian equipment can easily move and maneuver. Let me remind you that back in 2022, when Russian forces first tried to cross the Siversky Donets River during the battles for Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, they made 2 or 3 attempts. One took place near the settlement of Bilohorivka, in this pocket near the Rosinka tourist base, where Russian troops were struck by artillery. The second attempt was in the area of Dronivka, right on this sector, but that crossing also failed in 2022. At that time, there were no drones, no FPV drones, nothing of the sort. Now, Russian units are once again at the point where, apparently, another operation to force the Siversky Donets will be required. But this time, it will be a completely different operation, and of course, the Ukrainian armed forces will have far fewer chances to hold this line. Most importantly, of course, is the town of Siversk itself. More specifically, these structures here, this industrial zone located to the north. Today, pro-Ukrainian cartographers from the Deep State team made a notable update. They do not mark this northern encirclement of Siversk as Russian-controlled territory, but rather as a grey zone, meaning something is happening there. Apparently, the first signals have already come from Ukrainian units, either that saboteurs entered, or that storming attempts are underway, or perhaps Russian troops are trying to establish a foothold. In any case, this area is already under fire and targeted by Russian command. Let me also remind you that if we rewind to August 30th, 2025, the day Gerasimov presented his General Staff plan and report, we return to this map. This was the map published by Valery Gerasimov, showing the front line. Looking at the Siversk sector, pay attention to this salient here and this one. On Gerasimov's map, they were already shaded as Russian-controlled, including the industrial zone. So, according to Gerasimov's map, as of August 3031, this territory was already under Russian armed forces control. Today, as you can see, this information is partly and indirectly confirmed even by pro-Ukrainian mapping services. If we combine these two pieces of news, I can say with 90% confidence that this mine, or whatever facilities are located here, are already under Russian control. Thus, we see that Siversk is already in a partial encirclement, from the south and soon from the north. Today, we also observe active Russian advances toward the settlement of Yampil, with first reports indicating fighting on its outskirts. Slightly northwest, the Lyman sector of the front. Just yesterday evening, pro-Russian sources published footage of objective control, a 2-minute 18-second video. In it, we can observe 3 episodes of Russian soldiers raising the Russian flag in the southwestern part of this village. On the map, you see 3 flags marking the exact points where the Russian tricolor was raised. That entire section has since been shaded accordingly. This is how the map looked on September 7th. Today, it already looks like this. Furthermore, some cartographers made an interesting update, indicating that the northwestern part of Zarichne has also fallen under Russian control. This is actually a very significant development. The fact is, Zarichne had 2 supply roads. One was the Lyman-Zarichne road, 0528, and the other came from Stavki to the north, through strongpoints further southeast. Based on all updates, as well as adjustments provided by neutral and pro-Ukrainian cartographers, at this point all normal dirt roads leading to Zarichne are not just under fire control, but under physical control. For now, the Ukrainian side can still move and supply forces across fields, though at a reduced pace, with lower quality and capacity. But even these fields are under FPV drone surveillance. We must clearly understand, within a day, 2, 3 or 4 at most, Zarichne will be fully shaded in favor of the Russian army, and then nothing will remain to block the advance toward Lyman. Some company-level strongpoints may still exist, but this is only a matter of days, not a question of if, but when. Chandri-Holov. The Russian army is gradually expanding its bridgehead and shrinking that of the Ukrainian forces. Today, some pro-Russian cartographers reported that Russian troops entered Chandri-Holov from the southeast and continue advancing. Apparently, the time for negotiations has ended. Russian units are steadily tightening the noose around Ukrainian formations. In the near future, we should expect Ukrainian forces to retreat to the western bank of the Nitrius River, where they will likely try to set up a defensive line to prevent further Russian advances toward Izium. Kupiansk sector, no changes, only a large number of reports claiming things are bad for Ukraine there, but nothing more. Northern direction, Sumy sector. Today, neutral and pro-Western cartographers marked an endpoint in the battle for Yunikivka. Unofficial, unconfirmed reports say that Yunikivka has been completely cleared by Russian forces. The village was apparently wiped off the map, but in any case, some structures remain where the Russian army can consolidate before potentially moving further toward the city of Sumy. Thus, the battle for Yunikivka, which lasted about half a year, beginning around March or April 2025, has come to an end. In the near future, the Russian Ministry of Defense will most likely confirm this information as well. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes. All the best to you.